your vantage point, what are the biggest gaps between the global ESG expectations and the reality of data in African businesses?
And requesting information that one, the companies are not understanding. Two, they do not have the capacity to collect and report back on these requirements, and then it's very detached from these local realities. So basically, for company and for small businesses, that they don't have the resources to allocate, let's say, a team of sustainability teams, so that they can have those requirements and report back to the bigger player. They would be left alone, left aside, so that they would not be participating in all these the supply chain from bigger companies.
We know that Africa needs roughly $277 billion a year to meet its climate goals, but only around $30 billion currently flows into climate projects. So
we face that initially, that we are still also like in our early stage, and then we face with company where they're like, we really need this, we really want to work with this, but we cannot afford it. How can we? And then from our side, from our perspective, commercially, like how can we find the balance?
The polluters of the past have to pay for the problems that they've created sometime in the past. Hello and welcome to the Carbon Circle podcast. My name is Roshan Rai. I'm the founder of Carbon Mandal and the host of Carbon Circle, a podcast where we go beyond buzzwords and talk about the real work of building sustainable Bharat and more climate resilient global south. The topic that we've chosen today is contextual ESG for global south, lessons from the firm 180 Pi for India and Africa's SMEs. So with us, we have a very esteemed guest today, who is Mehe Cheri, founder of 180 Pi, a specialist climate data and ESG company working with businesses and capital providers across sub-Saharan Africa. 180 Pi is building climate data infrastructure for African businesses, helping companies understand their climate risk, produce structure sustainability reports and roadmaps, and access green finance by giving investors data they can trust. In this episode, we'll explore Mehe's journey and why she chose to build data infrastructure company and not a generic consulting firm. The second topic is why many off-the-shelf ESG tools fail in African and Indian SME contexts. And the third topic that we're covering is how 180 Pi actually builds good enough but credible data systems in messy environments. And finally, we'll look at what all of this means for SMEs in India, and especially as supply chains and regulations like CSRD and similar regimes evolve. Mehe, welcome to the Carbon Circle. It's a great pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you, Roshan, and thank you for Carbon Mandal for inviting me. I'm very happy to be part of this conversation, and I think that the subject is timely and sometimes misunderstood. So thank you for providing the space to discuss it further.
The pleasure is all ours, and I look forward to having a very engaging conversation with you today, given that you're the first guest that we have representing the African continent, right? So we'll likely have some commonalities, perhaps certain learnings that we can take from this entire conversation. So we will begin with the first topic today, that is looking at a journey. So I would like to start with your personal journey before we go deep into frameworks and finance. Often the tools we build are shaped by realities we have personally seen. So Mehe, walk us through your journey into climate and ESG. What are some key experiences that led you to start 180 Pi?
Thank you. So my journey into the climate and ESG did not really begin with the sustainability. It started with the finance. For many years, I was working in the development sector and in a climate-related program in Germany, in Uganda, in Malawi. And my work was initially about not about climate strategy in itself, but then more about operational, like budget, control, procurement, grants, audits, contracts, donor requirements, and so on. So at first glance, it may sound far away from the climate intelligence, but actually it shaped everything around how to see the climate information. So the finances teaches me how very simple discipline, money must be justified. Every euro or dollar, every procurement has to connect to a decision, to a result, and to system accountability. And then later on, I start working more with climate and energy clusters, mainly in Uganda and in Malawi. And there I was seeing like from the private perspective, from the private development sector, how the discrepancy between the urgency of the environmental, like where we are right now, and the fact that there's so many companies and small businesses that they are doing a lot, so it's not about the intention, but about like how they can access those green funds. And it comes to data. It comes to how those companies their realities into information that donors and funders can understand, assess, and eventually like provide capital. So this is the idea how my journey came into like creating 180
Yeah.
Pi. And then I
Yeah.
started with the ESG then, and how to translate this information for the small businesses.
That's a very interesting journey. I mean, starting from a development sector, real estate, and then moving on to the climate sector, must have given you a lot of experiences, that is understanding economics in a much more deeper sense, because every euro, every dollar that you put into a business has to give returns. And most often, when people talk sustainability, they miss the economics pillar of it, and perhaps that makes you even more vital in accessing green finance funds and more of the same sorts. But again, I mean, my follow-up to that is trying and understanding how your journey led to starting 180 Pi, very unique firm. So maybe you could give me some backstory into how did you form 180 Pi, and how does your organization stand different from the rest of the consulting firms?
Yeah, so like I started it with the idea of like there are these international standards that they are faced with local realities, and then I started with how to translate those international standards into local reality and local businesses, that they would have the same information. So I started like from seeing like what is on the ground, what the companies are collecting, what are the challenges that they are facing, and then what from the other side, the requests, and then to try to be in between and to try to find this translation in between. And then it started like I was thinking like it cannot be just a consultancy like as a one-to-one per company, but it has to be like a system that many companies and portfolios and cohort can benefit from. So how to create that system that many company in the same sector in the same reality can also be translated into like international standards. So that's basically like the first start of 180 Pi and the platform itself.
Right, but did you have any examples in Africa that you could look up to while starting 180 Pi? Are there similar companies that are in the space that you could buy inspiration of?
Many companies, but then mostly like in Europe, where I would see like what kind of similar concept. But then in the African space, it was there's no platform that is translating into an African reality. And why is like there's much more data available for European and let's say American, North
Yeah.
American, when it comes to data, to emission factors and so on. While in the African continent, it is growing, but it's still not there. So the data is still missing and the data is still not available. So it is building on European standard, let's say, and then trying to see how do we translate that into an African setting, in the African setting.
Yeah, I mean that's a real challenge. I mean, even in India, we do face a challenge with the lack of data, because for the longest time, the data that is related to sustainability was not being tracked, and for now being relevant for being a global player, and specifically when it comes to sustainability. Uh, I mean, to produce these reports, data becomes very vital. So building a structure and infrastructure around it becomes critical to be able to undertake this exercises. So tell me this, Mehe, was there any specific project or interaction with a business or investor where you thought we don't just need more consulting, we need better data infrastructure? Was there a project or any experience of the sort?
Yeah, we have been working with a company that like into the coffee in the coffee market,
Hmm.
where the idea is that for those companies to export for Malawi. Basically, we started from here in Malawi, and the companies are interested into the export, but then to export, there's certain regulation that they need to follow through. But then they are, again, these are like small businesses, and they have so many other front to tackle, and then to add the layer of sustainability to them, to understand what is requested from them, to understand what are the methodology and so on. It is quite complex. And we came in, and we were trying to translate those methodology and those calculation and so on. But then we faced in sense, like for example, when we are calculating the carbon footprint for a company, the international standard, European standards, it's not translating to a reality in here in Malawi or in Kenya, or where people are using firewood for different things that they are using, like the transportation. It's a different way where you would need to use a motorbike, and there is like the so it's like there is a lot of small reality, and how do we translate those into the methodology that exists to calculate, let's say, carbon footprint, and then to be able later on to put it into their sustainability reporting and to
Right.
request that they are level and so on.
Yeah, very, very interesting, fact that every nation has uniqueness with how they run their operations. And there would be a realistic calculation that has been made from a European context, but just replicating it in our own country might not be always possible, because the ground realities are often different. I mean, when you mention that for transportation, bikes are being used in comparison to the trucks or maybe some larger vehicles there, the that data translation would be very, very different. So tell me this, I mean, how do you come up with figures and numbers around it? I mean, what would your take on this entire approach be?
Yeah, I mean, like we were starting with like how to be practical. It's like
Hmm.
what kind of factors and what kind of emission that there are already existing, and then how to calculate that as an estimation in the first place. And then from there, how to go deeper into the information. Let's say the companies are using firewood and so on. Like how do we translate that, and what kind of factor do we use? What kind of emission factor? There is not in every country, but then some of the countries that they are having, like they are more advanced. So, for example, South Africa or Kenya and so on. So, can we take those emission factor and then translate it into a reality in Malawi?
Right.
How can we, for example, for a company that they are, I mean, some of the companies that they are more aware about sustainability and more and trying to make some effort so that they would not use the wood in itself, but that they would use the bamboo. And the bamboo,
Hmm.
it is have less carbon footprint,
Carbon
but then
emissions.
there is no calculation, exact carbon emission, and there is no calculation related to the bamboo. How do we find those calculation? And it's basically like a lot of trial and error, and then conversation with people from different universities, and it's like we start being pragmatic and then going deeper and deeper, and we are still like in the trial space
Yeah,
where we are
yeah.
every time we are facing something and we're like, oh yeah, this is something that we didn't think about it before. How do we tackle that?
I mean, I myself do face similar challenges here in India as well. I'm just drawing parallels because there are certain aspects that are very unique to the nation. So there is no pre-existing data or a emission factor that we can directly translate to. So that's always an interesting journey that we take, engaging in the multiple people from universities, from uh, from people on ground, on field, and everywhere. But tell me this again. In the early days, what were some surprising things that you discovered about how African businesses actually collect, store, or don't store data?
Yeah, that's basically maybe this assumption that we have that companies that they are running business, they have all their information in place. In like in terms of like fuel invoices, water bills, about HR documentation for their employee, about their supply chain, and then like the relationship with their suppliers and so on. So all these kind of thing, you have companies that they are working, I mean, they're functioning companies, but then all these information and data are not stored in one place. So if you come to a company and you try to have this information, it will take them time to collect it. It will take them time to understand that these are very relevant and very important information that you have within your uh, data and archive. And what we did in the beginning is that we started with one company where we are asking like few information about like the general information about like the registration and so on, but then also like there's the environmental part, about the water, about the waste, about the energy consumption and so on. And then we realized that they don't have all the information. So what we do is like we thought like at an initial reporting, we take an estimation. We
Mhm,
check what we have as
mhm.
information, and can we collect that for the yearly, and then make an estimation. And then that will be like a learning for the company in itself to say like, oh, actually, I need to keep all my receipts so that I can have more accurate information. Because by having more accurate information, then I would know where I'm standing and what I'm asking for. Because the objective is basically for them to have an accurate report so that they can go to a lender, to investor, and say like, we are in this, we would want to reach this target. By reaching this target, we would need to have this financing and so on. So it's like it's both ways
Quantifying. Yeah,
for
yeah,
us to learn.
absolutely.
Exactly. So it's like it was interesting like in the beginning, and we are still again working with those company, and like the learning, it's on both sides, I would say.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure that it must be challenging to work around lack of data, because for many companies it might not have been necessary to retain these documents or this bills or receipts in the past, but given that sustainability has now become a reality of today and likely of the future as well. Uh, the maintaining of this data becomes critical for us to be able to generate report. But Meher, thank you so much for giving us an insight into your world and building of 180 Pi. So you have painted a very powerful picture of why you chose to build 180 Pi the way you did. And now let's zoom out and look at a bigger system that you operate in, the climate finance and the ESG landscape around African businesses. So, Meher, globally, we see more and more ESG disclosure framework from CSRD in Europe to evolving expectations from investors and banks. On paper, this sounds great, but when these frameworks travel to the global south, especially to the SMEs, they often don't fit the ground reality. So, from your vantage point, what are the biggest gaps between the global ESG expectations and the reality of data in African businesses?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I mean, especially like the CSRD receive a hit last year from within already Europe. I mean, it's like it was meant to be mandatory requirement for European businesses to report on the CSRD framework, and the CSRD is very heavy on bigger company. And then those company would request those information to their supply chain, and then like their supply chains are rooted in, let's say, India as well, but also like many African countries and so on. And it is heavy. It's coming to a reality here, and then requesting information that, one, the companies are not understanding, two, they do not have the capacity to collect and report back on these requirements, and then it's very detached from these local realities. So basically, for company and for small businesses that they don't have the resources to allocate, let's say, a team of sustainability team, so that they can have those requirements and report back to the bigger player, they would be left alone, left aside, so that they would not be participating in all these the supply chain from bigger companies. So those regulations are it's like it goes very deep and very detailed, but then it's somehow get detached from reality, and I think that like, how do we make that those regulation answer to a questions, like we need to have reporting, not for just reporting, but we need to have to build companies that they are more resilient. We need to build companies that they are more can face environmental challenges, and not just like think into collecting data and reporting back.
Right, right. I mean, it's definitely again challenging to meet the expectations of the the European standards, and especially in the global south, where a lot of these data are missing. Mehem, can you describe what data looks like from a typical SME that you work with, say an agriculture exporter or a distributed energy company? Are we talking about them having ERP systems or paper invoices or phone calls? What does it look like day to day when it comes to data?
Well, it depends on the size and the maturity of the company. In many cases, data look like more ordinary than people imagine. And when people hear climate data, often they imagine satellite system and sensors and dashboards and so on. But on the day to day, it's like more like a fuel receipt, electricity bill, a delivery record, or like as a supplier list and so on. So it's like more simple than what people would imagine, and those are already like data that it could be used, even like WhatsApp messages with farmers and driver and technician, and then to see like that the person traveled from X to like from A to B and so on. So these are all information that could be useful,
Right.
and it doesn't have to be necessarily like more sophisticated.
Very true. But do you see digitalization happening among the African businesses where they now work with ERP systems? I mean, of course, the bigger firms might be having them, but do you see digitalization taking taking up and being taken or being implemented in SMEs and small micro businesses?
For smaller and micro businesses, it's no.
No.
They are still. It's still not the case for smaller businesses. For bigger businesses, yes, but then for smaller businesses, it's still not there.
I understand. I understand. Again, I mean, as a follow-up to the same, and how do you see evolving EU frameworks like CSRD or ESG related directives show up in your conversations with African exporters who serve European market? I mean, what is the feedback that you receive from them?
So from the companies themselves, you mean?
Yeah, yeah, from the African companies. How do they find all this compliance or mandates related to sustainability?
overwhelming. And like there is like the two part where they would say like, yeah, very interesting, I would like to continue on that, but then I don't have the time, I don't have the space, I don't have the resources to do that. And the CSRD, when someone would present the CSRD, they would, it's like it's a bit uh, overwhelming. It's like also for the professional in the field. There is the baby version of the CSRD, which is the VSME standard, which I think is very much applicable to companies like in here, because it gives the same sort of information, but then on a simplified form. Um, and it would feed into the supply chain, and it would feed into the bigger company. So I think that smaller businesses do not have necessarily to report on CSRD, because it's way too complex and it's not the objective, and it's not even, it will not answer the reality of the companies. The company don't have the time and the resources to do that. Like who would be paying
Yeah,
for such services,
exercise.
for companies that they are exactly for companies that they are still struggling with their daily operations. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I mean, given that you work with companies on ground there, what is their perspective on sustainability overall? Do you see companies kind of accepting this requirements when it comes to ESG reporting with a more open arms, or are there resistance that you see among these companies? I mean, what is your take on that?
I think that the awareness is starting, and I
Hmm.
think that the companies are starting seeing the benefit of reporting, and it like I think that it should not be presented as reporting, because reporting it's have a connotation of like mandatory, regulatory, and so
Right.
on. But then to seeing the benefit, um, how to measure, and what to measure, and
Hmm.
what we are gaining out of that. But then there's also like another trend here, in many African countries, that they are now mandating bigger companies to report on ESG through the IFRS standard. So, for example, Kenya, starting from next year, will have bigger company report on the IFRS.
Hmm.
Nigeria, the same. South Africa, the same. And the fact that the local company, the local banking system, and the local financial system is also requesting from their own companies to report, it gives more to the companies in here, this awareness of like, oh yeah, okay, we are not
Yeah.
only reporting for export, we are not reporting to be in contact, like to have this relationship with north south, but it's also within their own system. And there's
Yeah.
many green financial products that are being developed now with local banks.
Hmm.
So I think that the companies are slowly seeing the benefit of like measuring, so that they can also access not only international finance, but also local finances,
Right.
which
Right.
is, I think it's a really good.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly had a conversation with a gentleman from Scotland by name Ian Watt 1 week before, and we had similar discussions again, around DCFD and IFRS too. So again, the mandate goes with the investing class, because the moment the finances ask for reports around the climate risk and the strategies around, that is when companies start taking this a little more seriously and start adopting it. And I think this is similar from the answer that it just gave me, because when local banks start asking for data related to this, companies see more benefit and value in undertaking exercises like this. We have a clear sense of the mismatch, that is global frameworks on one side, messy and often incomplete data on the other. I would now love to go into how you and your team are actually bridging that gap, how you turn real world data into something credible and decision useful for banks, DFIs, and investors. So let's move to this third topic for today, that is building good enough but credible climate data systems. So you have described 180 pi as climate data infrastructure built for African businesses, which is a very specific phrase. So I want you to unpack what that actually means in practice. So when you say climate data infrastructure, what are the main building blocks? Is it data pipelines, methodology, software, advisory? How do you describe it to a CEO that you're talking to?
Yeah, so like maybe I will tell you like how it started and why we reached the climate data infrastructure. We started with ESG.
Hmm.
We thought that for companies to access green finance, they would
Hmm.
need to have a translation method, and the translation method is like ESG frameworks to translate their own operation into a report that is internationally understood. But then we realized along the way, I think that ESG is very important, and this is what we are still doing, and it's a very like a big pillar of what we are doing, but it's
Hmm.
not enough.
Right.
For a company spending their time collecting these data and having a nice report, what they will do after that, what is how would they benefit from spending all that time and then produce a report.
Hmm.
And we said like we want to stop in there. We want to showcase to the companies where they can actually act, where they can have some transition initiatives, where they can have a target so that they can improve, let's say, on a yearly basis and have
Hmm.
a yearly target. How do we have like a roadmap for companies that they are like experiencing like I don't know, like the heat wave and the drought and so on? How do they know that they have a physical risk to their assets,
Hmm.
and then what kind of thing that they need to do to adapt or to
Hmm.
mitigate? So basically, like the platform, it's around that. It's about recording your data to produce a report that it's that you can present it to a lender, but
Hmm.
also support companies into their roadmap for like the yearly base, and to have like a target with transition targets and so on, and then they would
Right.
reassess it again. Also like to have this climate risk assessment, like the physical risk and so on. So and that's why, and there are so many other building block, and then we think that this is like an information about the climate infrastructure for a company to for them to use, and that's only reporting in itself.
Right, right. So it's like an entire platform that you're building for multiple aspects of sustainability, which includes ESG reporting, at the same time assessing physical climate risk, and then the likely transition or the roadmap that the companies can think of in the near future. Am I right in understanding that?
Exactly, exactly. And
Right,
then also like how to quantify the risk, how to financially quantify the risk, because by
right.
the end of the day, we want to, let's say we want to reduce this X carbon emission.
Hmm.
For that, we need a solar panel. How much this would cost us, and then how much this would then translate into emission. We need to move our, because of heat wave, or because we are in, for example, here in the south of Malawi, like we want to move our asset from this place to that place because of drought risk, like how
Hmm.
much that adaptation measure would cost. So
Right.
like how do we measure those impact that we would want to? So that's basically like the idea of like climate intelligent data
Yeah, yeah.
infrastructure. Yeah.
I mean, my follow-up question to this is again, I mean, wanting to try and get an example out of this. So, let's take a typical client, say a mid-sized agribusiness that exports to Europe. So, can you walk us through a step by step? How do you go from scattered operational data to an ESG or climate report that an investor can use?
So basically, the company would have access to the platform.
Hmm.
We would through we would we would support like the company into the accessing the platform, and then it's a guided
Exercise.
workflow for the
Hmm.
company.
Right.
Exactly, and like we structure it in a way that it's easy and understandable for the company, and say like you would need your general information, you need your environmental information, you need your social and governance, and under each of these information that we have like some guidance into like what kind of information do you need to feed into this general or enter the environmental and to the social and so on. Once all these information are included, and then with some other questions, additional questions, and like wherever data is there, there is like some sort of like kind of a report to say like these are informations are missing, so that it would support the companies into like, okay, this information I still need to put in here and there. And then after all the informations are included, then we will have a generated report. A generated report is like based on the international standards that everyone would understand, and is also like structured in a way that that follow the ESG standards. And basically that this is a report that company can use, and this is a report that they can share with banks or impact investors.
Right. Interesting. Again,
Yeah.
I think that's a standard procedure. Most of the consulting firms also follow here in India as well, right? But again, the biggest challenge, I think we are kind of synonymous on that is the data part of it, because translating that data that is non-existent into something that is more quantifiable is definitely the challenge. How do you work with the local emission factors like proxy data or public climate portals to fill these gaps? For example, using regional climate data, land use data, or sectoral benchmarks to support your advisors. I mean, because I feel you, because even in India there is a lot of data that is missing, so there is a data gap, and we got to fill in those gaps through
Yeah.
certain assumptions. So how do you work on this in Africa?
I work with existing data, which
Mm.
is like we started with let's say the emission factor that we have in Europe,
Hmm.
even though knowing that it's not comparable to the realities in here. So we started with that, and then slowly we check around what are the different countries around us that they have developed certain emission factor, and then we take that and we replace in different categories. Like we replace, for example, I don't know, like travel commuting. What can we use as emission factor? We cannot use like the European ones, but then
Yeah.
we can use the South African one. But the South African one, it would not be a one-to-one for Kenya, because Kenya have a different economy and so on. So we're trying to have some of this estimation, but we
Hmm.
also are trying to work with the universities, so that we will be having like more accurate data. So
Right.
we go from being practical, and then try like with the time to specify it. The more we work, the more we specify it with local realities, and then like how do we reach what we want to reach slowly and without
Yeah.
like stopping and saying like, oh, we don't have data, so we don't work. No, we try to just like to work with what we have.
Right, but among the African countries, according to you, who's at the forefront when it comes to this kind of data? Is it South Africa? Is it Kenya? Which countries have
South
really
Africa,
good data that is available? South Africa?
I think South Africa, it's the frontier. Kenya is also like coming.
Hmm.
There's Ghana, which is we are not present there. We are mostly like in the Eastern and Southern Africa. So that's
Hmm.
why I'm like in this region of the world, South Africa for sure, and then Kenya is coming as well.
Right, right. Okay, so now let me switch gears into something that is a little more geopolitical in nature. So we know that Africa roughly needs roughly $277 billion a year to meet its climate goals, but only around $30 billion currently flows into climate projects. So from your perspective, how much of that gap is purely a data problem, a lack of standardized, trusted metrics and reporting versus policy or risk appetite?
Yeah, yeah. I would not say that the climate finance gap it's purely data
Mm.
problem. Africa climate finance gap is also, yeah, I mean, it's like the policy, there's the currency problem, there's fluctuation in the currencies, and like the black market problem. We have like the perception of the risk. Like if you say it's an African company, there is a certain risk perception
Yeah.
which is higher. There is how like the regulations and how the regulation are being implemented or not. So but the data is it's a very like it's a very important, right? It's like
Right.
it is like if there are enough informations and if there are enough verified trusted information to fill in all the other parts, that maybe like probably would be would that would probably be like help support like closing that gap. But then I think that yeah, like there's all the other aspects as well, like around that feeding into that gap, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah. So it's not just data problem that you clearly are pointing out to, because a lot of the aspects also require some amount of attention, including policies and the stabilization of currency and maybe the geopolitics itself for many of these firms to be more trusted, so that the funds could flow into the global south. But again, thank you for giving us insight into the world that you today serve. Let's now switch again gaze into the economics part. So this is really insightful because you're not just talking about tools, you're talking about system design, how data standards, finance interact. I would like to take this further into economics of what you do and the ecosystem you're helping to build, and then draw some lessons back for India, because the overarching theme that you're talking about is a Viksit Bharat 2047. So let's talk about the business model, the ecosystem around climate data infrastructure, because for anything to scale in Africa or in India, the economics have to work for businesses, the investor, and sometimes even for donors and the development program. So how do you structure the financial relationship? I mean, who should ultimately pay for the climate intelligence? Because there is a cost attached to it.
Yeah, yeah. It's like it's an ongoing conversation, and there's a few weeks ago I wrote something about it. Um, it's very difficult, right? Because you have these reports that need to happen. You have this information that it's needed. It's needed from the companies for their company themselves. It is needed for the bank to be able to assess, or the investor to be able to compare, and so on. But it's expensive, and it comes with the cost. I think that companies themselves, that they bear all the cost, it would be unfair. I think that it should be like a model where it's a blended finance model, where a company would have to bear some of the costs. It cannot be for free, because always like something which comes for free, it's not valued.
Yeah.
But then the company would need to see like the benefit of like why contributing to have this information, so that they can be more resilient and so on. But then also the ones that they are requesting this information would also need to contribute into into this cost, like the investors and the donors. So ideally is to have like why not later on like some subsidies from governments, where companies are able to report, and some ecosystem for portfolio and cohort, that there is some program to support into the sustainability reporting and the sustainability measurement. So we face that initially, like we are still also like in our early stage, and then we face with company where they're like, we really need this, we really want to work with this, but we cannot afford it. How can we do? And then from our side, from our perspective commercially, like how can we find the balance? I mean, we understand that from the other for company perspective, it's lengthy, it's expensive, and how for us we can be viable. And this is like the balance that we are
Question.
still trying to.
Yeah. I mean, it is definitely a balancing act, and again, the problem that SMEs face is also very real. It's just not that they do not want to take this initiatives up. It is just that it costs money, and you when you're already working with thin margins, it becomes extremely difficult to bear the added costs of taking an exercise of this sort, which will definitely pay them, but pay them in a very long term timeline, not immediately. So I mean, I do agree on that part. Maybe uh, certain countries, certain companies, certain size of companies definitely require some additional support from outside, maybe through subsidies or maybe some donors or maybe the climate funds itself flowing from the global north, given that the polluters of the past have to pay for the problems that they've created sometime in the past as well. Okay, but again,
Yeah.
let me ask your opinion on the African perspective. So, where do you see the opportunities for the South-South collaboration, for example, between African climate data companies like 180 Pi and Indian firms like Carbon Mandal to co-create methodology, share tools, or jointly serve as global value chains? Where do you see the opportunities?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I think that the collaboration opportunities is could be big.
Mhm.
I mean, these are different realities on the African continent or in the India reality, but there are similar challenges. And they are faced with kind of the same supply chain, so that they are serving within their own reality, but the local reality, but also like working with the North African, the North American, and the European. So the same requests are coming on both ends. And then it could be like a more of exchanging about like how do in India they reach to, for example, the calculation of the carbon emission, and then it could be like a learning process on both sides, like in countries in Africa and then in other parts in India, like how, for example, the challenges that the smaller companies are facing, and I assume that it's like the same challenges about like data and about affordability and so on, how those would be tackled, and like more of an exchange of information, an exchange of like tools, and to learn if this would work in here or the other. So I see like a lot of possible collaborations in that on that front.
Yeah, well, for sure, because the problem of the global south is very different from the global north. And as you rightly pointed out, there is definitely possibilities where our problems kind of overlap. Given that the scale and range at which we perform might be slightly different. But again, I mean, I clearly see there are definitely opportunities for the overall global south to work alongside, right? Tell me this, May. I mean, how do you envision Africa in the future? So, in an ideal future, what does some mature African climate data ecosystem look like to you? What are the core institution standards or shared infrastructures that need to exist according to you?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, if I would wish for in Africa in the next let's say 10 years, um, I would love to see in terms of sustainability and in terms of climate information that it become as important as financial information. That a company right now sees, I mean, that was not the case years ago, right? But like that sees like that to make a financial report is as important to make a sustainability report, is to be able to price the risk, which is something that should happen, like it should be mandatory, and it should be like not as a luxury or not as something that to do it on the side, but then it's something that they would see the urgency of it. Um, I would love that local bank also are able to develop further their green products and
Mhm.
to like that. that there is no dependency on only international funding, but also on local currency funding, and that there is local economy also being able to support this mitigation and adaptation. So hoping that it becomes like more of a, we have to do that. We see the benefit of it, and not more of a, yeah, it could be nice if we are caring about environment and so on. So yeah.
Yeah. Mehem, thank you for this because you're given us insight into the African businesses, the realities that you face as a business solving for climate change in Africa. I do resonate with a lot that you have spoken, and I genuinely hope and wish that in the coming days, the African businesses see the need for climate reporting as equal or perhaps more important than financial reporting, right? So that it becomes a reality where we don't just wait for international funds to support the climate solutions. The local investing class also have to be pitching in for the very climate action that we require as of today. Mehe, it was an absolute pleasure engaging with you. But how did you find this conversation so far?
That was it was a very interesting conversation. Thank you very much. That it was really a pleasure discussing here. Thank
Absolute,
you.
absolute pleasure, Meher, because I mean, this is my first where I'm engaging with an expert from the African region, and the problems that you shared with me regarding the ESG reporting and everything around the climate financing is maybe like I said, the scale might be very different, but we also face similar challenges here in India. But the financial institutions are much stronger here in India today, given that we have more exposure to many MNCs that are working out of India, right? But as a
Yeah.
consultant working in the space of sustainability, data infrastructure is definitely a problem. Unique products, unique systems, unique problems, unique businesses. No data references to have, so a lot of assumptions, a lot of data gap that requires to be filled. So Meher, this has been deeply grounded and hopeful conversation. We have explored how contextual ESG and data climate can make a difference between a promising idea and a funded scalable project, especially in places where data is messy, informal, or incomplete. You have shown us that the real question is not do Africa or Indian SMEs care about sustainability, but whether we can give them the tools that make sense in their reality, tools that can translate invoices, energy bills, or local knowledge into data that investors and regulators can actually trust. For our listeners, business leaders, sustainability teams, investors, there are a few clear takeaways. Climate finance in Africa and across the global south is global south will not scale without credible useful data systems that work in low data context. Off the shelf ESG templates are not enough. We need to context first methodologies and infrastructure like what 180 Pi is building for African businesses. There is a huge potential for South-South collaboration between Africa and Indian actors to co-develop frameworks, share learning, and support SMEs that sit in global value chains and face similar pressures. Meher, thank you again for sharing your journey and your work that you're doing at 180 Pi. For those listeners who want to learn more or collaborate with Mehe, we'll link 180 Pi and Mehe's profile in the description. And if you're a business leader or sustainability professional looking to build a practical ESG and climate strategy, navigate carbon accounting and reporting in a way that fits your business reality, or prepare your company for emerging regulations and supply chain expectation, you can reach out to Carbon Mandal. Visit www.carbonmandal.com to explore how consulting services can support your transition and journey, and together help Sustainable Bharat by 2047 to be built. Thank you for tuning into the Carbon Circle. If you found this episode useful, do share it with your colleagues, friends in your network. Until next time, this is Roshan signing off. Thank you so much.